Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I'm coming at you today from the snowy Denver, Colorado on this 26th day of January. And I hope wherever you are in this world that the weather for you is pleasant and sort of acceptable. And by that, I mean, I hope that you're accepting the weather as it is, because it might not be what you want. You might have had plans to go for a long bike ride like I did this morning, but decided not to because you don't want to fall on the snow and break your collarbone again and stuff like that, right? But the key is not the fact that the snow is here, and it's not the fact that I'm missing my bike ride, right? The reason why I'm not suffering because of the change in plans is very, very simple. It is because I'm accepting what is happening, not thinking about what might have happened, not thinking about what should have happened, not thinking about what I wanted to happen, but instead just realizing what is happening. And that is that there's a snowy day today, and there's a hazardous risk to my health if I do what I was planning to do. And so therefore, I can simply let go. Okay, I don't have to sit here and fret and grind myself and just get angry about the snow and the fact that I wanted my bike ride and it's not fair and why does this always happen to me and all that kind of stuff, because that is where my suffering comes from. And with that suffering goes my happiness. That is where it loses me. My happiness abandons me in the turmoil of that suffering. And so I hope wherever you are and whatever the weather might be for you today outside of you, outside of your house, that you're able to accept it. And one of the best ways and one of the most helpful ways in which to accept something like the weather is to recognize the impermanence of the weather. Now, this is a hint because this applies to everything, not just the weather. But when we can recognize the fact that the weather is not permanent, that even though today is a snowy day and I'm not going to get my bike ride in, tomorrow might be sunny, the day after might be sunny, the day after that might be sunny. But even if it's not, at some point, we will have another sunny day. I can bet everything on that, right? And so the idea then is to accept in the impermanence, or to use the impermanence to accept the current situation, the current status. But what's more important or more beneficial to understand in this regard is not so much how we apply this to the weather outside, but also to how we apply it to the weather inside of us. Now, of course, by weather inside of us, I'm using that as a metaphor to refer to the emotions, the physical sensations, and the thoughts that are happening inside our body and inside our mind, because that is what oftentimes will cause the same level of suffering. And fortunately, it is the exact same process. Recognizing that these thoughts and these emotions and the physical sensations are impermanent. And if we just sit for a few moments and let them pass, let them do what they want to do. It's never about trying to stop the emotions from happening. It's never trying to control the weather inside of us any more than it would be to control the weather outside. You would think me pretty weird and maybe insane if I was running outside today and yelling at the sky to stop snowing. Right? I might be put away somewhere if I did that. But that's what we do all day with our internal emotions. We sit here and we say, stop it, stop it, stop it. Or even worse than that, we don't even recognize it. And that's the benefit of, that's really the purpose of all of these podcasts that we do here, right? And this YouTube channel that I do here is to enlighten you and to give you the practical tools to develop the ever important awareness of the emotions, the physical sensations, the thoughts inside our bodies and minds. I'm reminded now of the old Paul Simon song, right? It's from "Slip, Sliding Away," the song. The lines in the song that I'm reminded of are, she said, "A good day ain't got no rain," and she said, "A bad day is when I lie in bed and I think of things that might have been." right there. That's mindfulness, Paul. Thank you so much, Paul. I know you're watching this, and I just want to tell you that I thank you for those words because they're so powerful. Along with many of your other words, I'm not worthy. I love you so much, but seriously, those two lines right there are exactly what we're talking about. Right? Because a good day doesn't have to have no rain, and a day with rain does not have to be a bad day. The question is, if you were sitting at home and every day it was a rainy day and you decide, okay, I'm not going to work, I'm not going to live my life, I'm just going to stay inside, I'm going to, just be miserable all day. What kind of life would that be? Nobody really lives that kind of life. I mean, I'm sure maybe there's some people, but most people don't. What do we do instead? We grab an umbrella. We put on a raincoat. We head out into the rain, but we head out prepared. And that is the important thing. And the same thing can apply to our internal weather. We can tuck an umbrella under our arm mentally as well as we can physically. Okay, if you're reading in the news that the forecast for today is rain or snow, what do? You grab your umbrella and your raincoat and you go off to work and you're prepared, right? And if you're going through something that is creating some mental and emotional difficulty in your mind, perhaps you're going through a particularly difficult part of your life, something at work, something with your family, something with a friend or a loved one. And when you're going through that, what do? You can prepare for it. You can say, okay, I'm likely to want to cry at some point today because of this thing that I'm going through. So what do? I grab a mental umbrella and the mental umbrella though is very simple. It's just the awareness, right? It's just knowing that at some point today, I might become overwhelmed with my emotions. And if I do, the umbrella is just the ability to pause. The ability to pause and allow the emotions to happen, but to do so in a way that I'm not getting entangled in them. And that's where the umbrella metaphor really works, right? I can put the umbrella up and I can stay dry even as everything around me gets soaking wet. And I can do that emotionally as well. And again, that is the key here, right? The key is the awareness. I often use the term, the metaphor, I should say, of a train coming down the tracks, right? If you're standing on a railroad track and you see a train a mile down the railroad there, right? You can do great many things, almost anything you can do to get out of the way of that train that's a mile away. Conceivably, you could even take a little cat nap and still get out of the way of that train. It poses no risk to you, right? But it's if the same train on the same railroad tracks and the same only this time you don't see the train until it's 50 feet away, well, now it's a life and death situation. So the same thing happens with your emotions. If you don't see your emotions and the thoughts that cause the emotions and the physical sensations that manifest from the emotions, if you're unable to see that, if your mind is not trained to see that, well then you're not going to see the big emotions coming until they're a train that's 50 feet away, and it's going to run you over. It's going to run you over every single time. And that's why as human beings, we're more like cats this way, because we have many, many lives, because most of us are getting run over by emotional and mental trains all the time. And so the key then is the awareness, right? If we can see the train far enough away, it becomes less dangerous. If we can see our emotions and our reactivity far enough away, they become harmless. They become something that we can very easily just let go or accept and just move on. And it's very, very simple. But the reason it's not necessarily easy is because of the habits that we have formed in our lives. And that's the topic for today. And you might be impressed at that segue. I know I am. And I want you to know that was not scripted. I just kind of came up with that on the spot. I did have to re-record this because I had a loss of my train of thought at some point in the last recording, but it was the same segue and it was not planned. So I just want you to know that I'm pretty proud of that. But anyway, kind of to jump off on what we were talking about yesterday, when we were talking about the pet peeves, right? We're talking about how those are an automatic, habitual, emotional reaction. That's what they are, but they're not the only ones, right? The pet peeves are just the kind of the big ones or the most common ones, or as I said, the ones that we kind of nurture and feed with our thoughts and our kind of investment. And but really, emotional reactivity is at the heart of almost all the suffering that you're ever going to encounter. And again, the emotional reactivity comes from the lack of awareness. Just like Paul Simon's song says, right? If you're thinking that a good day ain't got no rain and a bad day is a day where I lie around and I think of things that might have been, right? That is like a perfect example of what most people are doing, right? Most people, as soon as it's raining, what we're doing, we're lying around and we're just thinking about, what could have been, right? Again, just like my bike ride this morning, right? I really could have had a great bike ride this morning, but instead I'm not. Right? Now the reactivity that comes from that, in the past for me, before my mind was trained, in the past, this would have created a habitual reaction from me. And that reaction would have included some level of anger, some level of maybe depression, some level of resentment. And it would have bled over and spilled over into all the different, experiences that I had. It would have come through in this podcast. It would have come through in the conversations that I had with my kids and my wife this morning. It would have come through in all the stuff that I'm reading on Facebook. And I would have read things with a different kind of slant, or the articles that I read in the news, or the beautiful book that I'm reading. I would have only been halfway kind of listening and halfway kind of paying attention because of this emotional reactivity that's coming from something that I can't control. Right? And so instead, when I can recognize things like impermanence and allow myself to let go and to accept what is happening, well, then all of a sudden I'm not suffering anymore. And in the absence of the suffering, my happiness can arise. And that is really the key here, folks, right? Because a happy body is a healthy body. A happy body is and mind, of course, we're including the brain and the mind inside the body. But a happy body is also, not only healthy, but it's productive. It's profitable. It's love worthy. It's loving. And it's so many things that we want to be. And so all we have to do is let go of the suffering. And again, pardon me, I think I mentioned yesterday that during this time of year, I get some allergy things that cause a little coughing here and there, so I apologize. It's just a little tickle in my in my throat, and I'm sure with this nice, beautiful microphone, it sounded even louder when I cough. So I apologize for that. But anyway, let's talk about habits, right? Because that's really what this is. When we have reactions, anytime we have reactions. And a reaction is something that is automatic, that is quick, that is not contemplated, that is habitual, right? So anytime that we're having that kind of reaction, you can believe that you're performing at the mercy of your habit in that moment. Just like my habit would have been, again, 5, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, my habit would have been to be very angry and resentful at the fact that I didn't get to take my bike ride today. And it would have impacted all kinds of areas in my life, every area in my life, in fact. So let's back up for a minute and really just talk about what habit is, right? And because yesterday I talked about this, how much your brain loves habits. And it loves habits for two real main reasons. The first one is just sheer busyness, right? Your brain has so much going on that anything it can put off to the side and create a habit, an automated process for, it wants to do, right? I used yesterday the analogy of Amazon, right? If you had to have somebody sitting at a computer terminal and entering every order that Amazon processes in order to make it happen, Amazon wouldn't be able to exist. It would cost too much. You'd have to hire too many people to do that. At that point, you might as well just open a store like a Target, right? It just wouldn't happen. It just couldn't. The whole model is based on the ability to automate that process, right? That's the whole thing. And of course, that means that it's completely scalable. Like there's no end to which it can keep doing that thing. And so that's the same way that your brain looks at tasks, and especially emotional reactions and or responses, right? Or any kind of reactivity or any kind of response in your body, really. That's what your brain is doing. It's creating these automations so that it doesn't have to bog itself down thinking too much about these things, because your brain, again, has so much to worry about, right? And so the other reason why habits form is because, again, not just because of the automated nature of it, but also because of the sheer fact, the one thing that even though your brain is completely busy with all of this other stuff that's going on, really the one thing and the only thing that it wants to do is to live. It wants to keep this body alive. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's its sole purpose. And so it knows, because again, it has an amazing capacity for remembering things, for associating things with each other, and for just making sense of the landscape of our lives. It has such an amazing ability to do this that it knows that everything that has happened up until this point, right here, right now, everything that has happened has contributed to that one primary goal. And it knows this because you're still alive, right? And so how is a habit formed? Let's talk about habit just as a sort of a scientific thing, if you will. So a habit is nothing more than something that your body knows how to do. Your physical body knows how to do better than or without the assistance of your mental activity, right? Without your thinking about it, right? Now, every habit that you're ever going to have, this can apply to smoking, to drinking coffee, to eating sweets, to anything, right? Any habit that you could possibly form has three distinct elements to it. The first is the cue. Right? Something reminds your body like, oh, wait, that just happened. Now this thing has to happen. The second thing is the thing that happens, the process, the thing that the smoking or the sweets or the eating or the what have you, whatever that thing is, the habit. That's the second step. But the third step, which is equally as important as the first step, is a reward. Okay, so let's take, I would often use the example of smoking cigarettes, but instead of that, let's take something more universal, because most of you are not as old as me, and so you probably didn't start smoking when you were younger, only to have to go through the really, really difficult process of breaking that habit. Because really, this is why habits are very easy to form, but exceedingly difficult to break. Right? Because once your brain makes it that automated thing, it wants it to stay automated. It doesn't want to, reverse that and go back to saying, okay, now I have to do this all myself. Right? So it never wants to come back. So once it's a habit, it generally stays a habit until you go through a very deliberate and sometimes exhaustive process of breaking that habit. So let's talk about having a sweets. A lot of times, we might feel like in the middle of the afternoon, we might feel like, gosh, I have a sweet today. I just need a sweet right now. And so that is your body recognizing that it's a certain time in relationship to the last time you ate, in relationship to maybe your energy level is dipping a little. All this stuff is happening in your body to tell you, hey, it's time for my chocolate bar. Can we go to the vending machine, please, and get a chocolate bar? Now, the process is the going to the vending machine or the cafeteria or whatever it is to buy the candy bar, the cookie, whatever it is. And then the reward comes from the rush that we get from the sugar, right? We get a little energy, we get a little, the sweetness, and we get that burst of fuel coming from it. That's the reward. Do that for a few days in a row or a couple of weeks in a row, and all of a sudden that is a habit. And it is going to take a deliberate and again, sometimes very difficult process to break that habit. And in fact, there's a really great book about habits that I want to share with you here. And I'm sorry to digress here, but this one right here, okay, it seems to be having a hard time focusing. All right, there we go. I think that's good. So for all of you on the podcast listening to this, the book that I'm holding up is called The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. And it is written by Charles Duhigg, who is from the New York Times. He's a New York Times writer, amazing book, really, really fascinating. And you might want to check it out because, again, it's not just sweets and it's not just cigarettes. Cigarettes are a really easy example too of habits because, you know, we have so many different cues that make us want to have that cigarette, right? So after you have something to eat, after you have a cup of coffee, you know, after you get out of a meeting, when you get in the car, all these different cues, right? That create that, you know, when your body says, okay, it's time for a cigarette, that you don't even have a choice but to reach for that cigarette and light it up. And that's why, actually, I don't mean to digress here, but just to give you a little understanding about the habit of smoking, right? A lot of people will tell you that, well, smoking is addictive, so it's different. Well, the addictive nature of smoking is based on the chemical called nicotine, right? And if you decide, I'm going to stop smoking today, cold turkey, I don't care what happens, I'm just going to stop, so I'm never smoking another cigarette. Well, within about 2 to 3 days, all the nicotine is out of your body, and you're no longer addicted to nicotine after that. You might have some physical craving for maybe a day or two after that, but not more than that, not more than like 4 or 5 days. Then you're done with the addiction of smoking. However, if you've known anybody who's ever tried to quit smoking, you know that you're not safe from going back to smoking for years. I mean, even myself, I haven't smoked in 12 years now. And I still sometimes, you know, if I have a certain situation, I'm like, oh, man, I remember having cigarettes and it would feel so good right now to have that cigarette. Right. So it's not the, it's not the addiction. It's the habit that makes it so hard. And so the same thing could be applied to the habits of your emotional reactivity and your thought process and all of it, right? Because again, your brain wants to automate as much as it can. It's important to remember that. And so and this is where we get back to what we were talking about yesterday with the pet peeves, right? That every time this happens, you do that, right? Like boom, boom, like it's always the same thing, right? That is a habit. And the reason why you do it, right, is you get the cue, right, the thing that happens, right? So let's say, again, yesterday I talked about, you know, one of my old pet peeves was driving on the road behind somebody who was slow, right? Somebody driving in the fast lane who was slow. Gosh, that would boil my blood back in the day, right? So the cue is I'm in the car and I see a car going slowly, right? The process is for me to get angry at that. Right? The reward of that is the brain saying, you see, we're still alive and everything's okay because my body is doing exactly what it always does. Right? John Kabat-Zinn has this great quote where he says that the brain is, you know, most people walk through life thinking that the body is there just to hold the brain, the head and the brain on top of the shoulders so that we can just, you know, think our way through life. Right? And that's what this is, right? This is the brain just doing something very automatically. So it doesn't have to sit. It doesn't have to contemplate, why is this person driving slowly? Is it somebody who's a new driver? Is it a young kid who's learning, who needs to be, you know, encouraged? Is there something wrong with the person's car? Do they just not understand that they're in the fast lane? There's many, many different reasons that could be, that could reveal themselves as reasons why I shouldn't be upset with this. But my brain doesn't let me stop to think about that because my brain wants it to be an automated process. And that's where we get back to what I said yesterday also, is that the brain craves the familiar. Always. And so as we're bringing awareness to this process, right? The process, which is the mind, right? The mind is the process that's taking everything in from outside and everything in from inside, and it's making sense of the whole thing, right? So when we can bring awareness to that process, And we bring awareness simply by moment to moment, greeting each moment as its own experience, and understanding that in each moment we have the choice to be aware of what we're doing or to be oblivious to what we're doing. And as we train our minds to be more aware of what we're doing and what's going on inside of us and outside of us through the very simple practices, and as I said before in this podcast, I think it was in this one, that there are other ways to gain self-awareness. That's certainly true, right? But mindfulness happens to be my favorite one, and that's the one that I talk about here, right? But through very simple mindfulness practices of just paying attention in the present moment, on purpose, without judgment, and paying attention to this, we start to get an awareness of it. And in that awareness, that little reactivity that happens as I'm driving down the road and getting, before that reactivity happens, I get angry at the person in front of me who's driving slowly, right? The awareness allows me to see that trigger just like it's the train a mile down the track. And I can see, look, there's this person driving slow. Now I can contemplate. Now I can explore. Now I can be curious and compassionate about it. And I can also let go of the idea that I'm in a hurry. I'm so important. I got to get to where I'm going. It doesn't matter what else anybody else is doing. It's about me, right? And I can let that go, right? And I can be present. I cannot think about things that might have been. I cannot think about if this road was without this person in front of me, how nice that would be, right? So you see what I've done here. I've shown you how I can be present, I can be accepting or letting go, and I can be compassionate to say, well, maybe it's a child driving, a young teenager who's just learning this stuff. Do I want to scare this person and make a bad driver out of the person, or do I want to be patient and encourage this person, right? And then curiosity, to just ask the questions to begin with, right? And inquire, am I being present? Am I being accepting? Am I being compassionate? Right? And so these things are not tricks. It's not some kind of spell. It's just a skill that is developed through training. And that's the practices that I talk about here. Right? So if you wanted to take up a daily meditation, or you want to practice informal meditation, like when you're brushing your teeth or washing dishes or so on and so forth, these are all ways in which we can practice our awareness, right? In addition to that, we can start to develop the skill of just pausing for a moment. Just pausing to check in with that weather that's happening. Pausing to check in with, what am I doing here? Am I reacting to something? Right? And in that pause, in that just moment, and it doesn't take a long time. The pause can be as little as long as it takes to take one in-breath and one out-breath. It can be that quick. It can even be quicker than that because of the speed at which your brain works, right? You're talking about even a fraction of a second. You can pause to just check in. And in that moment that you're pausing and checking in, you have the choice to accept what needs to be accepted and to let go of what needs to be let go, to be present, to bring yourself back to the present, to bring yourself to compassion, and to apply curiosity. You have the choice to do that in every single moment, which is just one moment, by the way, but we're going to talk about that in a couple of days. And so when we practice, we get good at it. And it's just that simple, right? And so if you can devote, no more than 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes a day, folks, is all it'll take to gain this awareness inside a few weeks and develop really beneficial habits, right? The habit of unhabitual living. You can develop the habit of consciousness and intention. And all it takes is a little bit of, just a little bit of effort. It really is. It's very, very simple. It's not necessarily easy, but it's not hard either. And if you have a coach helping you through this process, well, then it becomes a lot less difficult for sure. And I can promise you that. So if you'd like to learn about how that works, how it works to work with a coach and what it feels like to work with a coach, I can show you that. And all you got to do is hop over to my website, artburnscoaching.com. At the bottom of every page, there's a banner that has a clock on it. Just click on that. You'll go into my calendar program. Find a day that's highlighted in black, I think it is. I think they're gray. They're grayed out if I'm not available. So if it's black, it means that I'm available. So find a time that is highlighted in the right color showing my availability that works for you. Click on it, answer a couple of very brief questions, name, email, that kind of thing. And then we're booked, and I'll take it from there. And just look out for an email from me with instructions, and you will be all set. I would love to do that with you. I really would. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Do the YouTube things, please. Like, subscribe, comment, share this, please, on the podcast. If you wouldn't mind taking a few moments just to rate and review the podcast, just give me whatever you think is fair. It definitely helps. All these things help to elevate my podcast within the algorithms of the given platforms, and will help me to get in front of more people who might benefit from this. So you can consider that an act of compassion, a practice of compassion, to take the time to do those things right now. And I really do appreciate it. Thank you again, everybody. I wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care.